Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. And he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace.
See, I wasn't working with a whole lot. The road we took to the Dead Sea spit us out right around here, and then we traveled up the coast until I eyed a piece of white, ash-colored land where the map suggested Gomorrah would be. There was no parking lot or anything, no tourists, or anyone for that matter, just a two-way road up and down the coast of the Dead Sea. So we pulled the car over and just started walking. Right away, a large ziggurat-type structure greeted us. Hey, look, it's me. You can see from the picture that this is still the entrance of the city because you can still see desert plants. And we know from Deuteronomy that no grass or seed will ever take root there. Well, sure enough, as we entered the city, hey look, it's me again. No grass or plants made their home there. You could see straight lines in the walls of the city where houses or other architecture used to be, and you could even see more ziggurat-type structures at major intersections. Although I didn't notice it firsthand on my trip since we only had about a few hours to explore, and you'd probably need about a few days from what I saw. But when I looked at this photo, I noticed in the background other symmetrical type structures off in the distance, and nature just doesn't do that type of thing. All the walls of the valleys were decorated with this swirl-like pattern. It was beautiful to look at, like heat had melted different layers of rock and stone together. But beautiful as it was just dust and ash to the touch. All these structures and ashen remains were great and all, but I still didn't have that smoking gun evidence that I wanted. I needed more evidence. I needed to find the sulfur balls that Ron claimed to be scattered all about. That would be my smoking gun. Only then would I be convinced that this was, in fact, the remains of that sinful city that God poured his judgment on thousands of years ago. Sure enough, I found more than a dozen small balls of sulfur scattered about. This is what's left of my personal collection today. I've burned some to show friends and family, and the smell is, well, horrifying. I can only imagine what it must have been like when these balls in their pure form came raining down from heaven on those lost cities. Yeah, if you ask me, I'd say Ron found it, but ultimately it's up to you if you want to believe him or not.
Now I know what Lotan has showed you is very interesting if you've never seen it before, but I want to establish this with more witnesses so you can really see that this is not just Lotan. There are many people who have verified what Ron Wyatt claimed to find.
Remains and ruins of the destroyed cities described in Genesis 19. Although the locals consider these remains to be sand dunes due to 3,500 years of rain erosion, archaeologists like Ron Wyatt and Jake Wilson have discovered evident man-made structures in the area in the 1990s. Formations such as ancient houses, gates, temples, statues can still be spotted in the area. As opposed to regular sulfur, this pale white form of sulfur can only be found in the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah. It cannot be found in any volcanic area or any mineral museum. Supporting the Genesis account, geothermal activity has never been recorded in the region, so these brimstones could not have come from a volcanic eruption.
Just one touch. I didn't even see the sulfur on my finger. Look at this blister. It was so hot, it was indescribable.
This is absolutely staggering. We've traveled the Holy Land. These are the believed sites of Sodom and Gomorrah, but the evidence is so overwhelming that right here, this is where Sodom and Gomorrah is. I have been absolutely impacted and impressed by this. It's just, I mean, right now I just feel just a sense of awe over me right now as we're here. And as we have discovered in these areas a brimstone, and they're like balls. And this brimstone is totally different than any other place on the planet. Most other brimstone, and I should mention brimstone is synonymous with sulfur. So brimstone is kind of the old word for sulfur. So we have found sulfur balls all over in these city areas here, and it's unlike any other sulfur on the planet, as I mentioned. They're white, and they are about 90 to almost 100% pure.
So I'm standing now at the largest of these early bronze sites on the southeast side of the Dead Sea. This one locally is known as Babedra, and is the site that is associated with Sodom in the Bible. It was discovered as an early bronze site back in 1924. It was excavated in the 1960s and 1970s. And what archaeologists found here was this burn destruction that goes across this site. This city came to an end through a fire destruction. So here you can see this ashy burn destruction layer just underneath the surface. It's full of human bone fragments, burned pottery, and it's covering the entire site. So off in the distance here, you can see Babedra, identified as Sodom. And then right here to the southwest is this massive cemetery that you can see with all these pits that mark its boundaries. And these are formed because of the locals for decades have been coming and digging into these graves looking for antiquities to sell in the antiquity market. And so it's estimated from the archaeologists that dug here back in the 60s and the 70s that there are around 500,000 people buried in this cemetery. And it's just staggering. And what's really intriguing then is that they found a burn destruction across the cemetery that happened at the same time that the city was destroyed. So the city and the cemetery were destroyed in the same fire disaster. And there's no reason why an army would attack a bunch of graves and burn a cemetery. And so this was one of the major reasons that they interpreted the destruction here as being caused by a natural disaster. In the excavation report, they show pictures of the bones in the graves that were warped by the heat. So I'm up here on the site called locally Numera, and this tower behind me was excavated, and 2 skeletons were found underneath the collapse of the tower on this side and one on the other side. There was burn destruction all through here, as you see in the picture from the excavation. However, it does seem like the collapse was able to preserve those skeletons better than most of the human remains here. You can see there's ash right here, and human remains, bones, are all through this ash, as you can see. There's this destruction layer is filled with human bone remains. Here's some ribs found in this area, burned pottery, a total burn destruction. The excavators here, the main excavator here is Walter Rast, who excavated also at Babedra. And he describes what they found in the excavations here at Numera. He writes, "The burnt debris covering this site has appeared in almost every area excavated. Whatever the cause, it was certainly a tragedy. Obviously, the town suffered a severe fire and was forever abandoned. Now, despite Walter Rast being a secular archaeologist, his conclusion about what he found in the excavations at Babadra and here in Numera were these. He says this: in the author's opinion, the vicissitudes of these two early Bronze III cities of Babadra and Numera may well be reflected in the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible. Okay, so Babadra was destroyed by fire at the same time that its cemetery was destroyed by fire. The city was never rebuilt. This city, associated with Gomorrah, has a burn destruction over it. The city came to a dramatic end with the fire destruction at the same time that Babadra was destroyed by fire. And this city was never, ever, ever lived in again. What is it that burned these cities and the cemetery at Babadra? The Bible describes it as burning sulfur raining down from the sky. And is there anything that, that matches this description that's still left in the geological record in this area? Just to give you an idea of how many sulfur balls there are. So this is a sulfur ball. Sulfur balls, all these are sulfur balls. Here, here, here. Look at all of them. There. Sulfur ball. Sulfur ball. Everywhere.
This brimstone is made of monoclinic, white sulfur that has been burned or cooked at a high temperature. It is quite different from natural sulfur that is formed in geothermal areas. Samples were taken to a lab for analysis. Each specimen was carefully separated and prepared for testing, with the outer portion cast aside. Next, the samples were dried and placed in a rock crusher. Then they were pressed onto a disc. Then they were loaded into a machine for the semi-quantitative X-ray analysis. Each sample was individually transported into the testing chamber for analysis. The results proved to be quite amazing. As the samples were found to be 98% pure sulfur, unlike any other sulfur found on Earth. This pure, cooked sulfur is the heavenly marker that was left behind to show the world that the Lord, without a doubt, destroyed these sinful cities at His command. Critics have said that the sulfur is from volcanic activity, but that type of rhombic sulfur is only 40% sulfur and is of a crystalline form, unlike the white, compacted monoclinic form that is found in the Ashen cities today. Here is a round piece of brimstone embedded in a section of ash. Another clump of ash contains a piece of brimstone that has a burn ring surrounding the unburned sulfur inside.
Considering the Bible describes this as being once like an Edenic area, you see nowadays it's just completely dead. As we are told, happened to this place that was judged. Today it's completely dead. Nothing is growing here. The whole thing is like sponge. And I really want to find one of those sulfur stones before the sun goes down. I really want to find one of those stones to show you. That is not a normal shape. That doesn't look natural at all. That is definitely seems to be a man-made shape. And is this not enough evidence for people to find all of these man-made looking structures, ashen remains, crumble in your hands, in the location where we're told in the Bible as evidence of God's judgment, as described by Josephus, historian, but then also finding circular, almost pure sulfur balls in the middle of the ash, in the middle of the walls and the shapes of the buildings. Is this not enough evidence for us?
The images look like something out of a movie, a tiny asteroid tearing through space at a speed of 33,000 miles per hour before streaking across southern Russia. Cameras caught sight of the white trail as it headed across the sky. And then this. An explosion of light, then a massive sonic boom.
Why did I show you that? Well, because the disbelievers want to pin the destruction of these cities on an airburst from an asteroid just like this one, except much bigger, that would destroy the cities. There's a major problem with this particular hypothesis, and that is no asteroids or meteorites or any space rocks have ever made it to Earth's atmosphere with any sulfur. None. It's never happened. So they are pulling this hypothesis out of their rear end.
Nobody talks about this. Why is this information so suppressed? Something that Lotan said that resonates with me is there was nobody there. There was not even a tourist attraction or anything. Dude, if the LGBT community knew, if this was widespread information, and if everybody knew that Sodom and Gomorrah was real and God actually wiped out the city, why do archaeologists not look into this? What are they looking at? If they're not looking at this, where it's directly in your face, what are they actually spending their time on? Lotan said there's nobody there. Dude, this thing has been discovered since 1990. That's 31 years ago. Come on. There's no archaeologists in Sodom and Gomorrah with all this video evidence after 31 years. That's the world we live in. The truth is suppressed.
Everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God.